Millions of people are taking Ozempic every single day and still watching their weight loss suddenly stall. And according to new research, the real reason has nothing to do with discipline, calories, or exercise at all. I am Dr. Gourd, and today I am sharing what the research actually says. New findings from Stanford University found that around 10% of people carry specific genetic variants that make their bodies resistant to GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy from the very start. And even for those without that genetic issue, there's a gut enzyme quietly working against this drug before it ever gets a chance to do its job. Today, I will show you exactly what to check before you ever take your first dose. And the number one thing on this list is something millions of people throw in the trash every single morning without realizing it may directly affect how well Ozempic works. Here is the thing that changes everything. Most people think Ozempic fails because of something they did wrong. They think they ate too much, moved too little, or that their body simply cannot lose weight. But science tells a very different story. Ozempic belongs to a class of drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It is a natural hormone your gut produces after you eat. It tells your brain that you are full, signals your pancreas to release insulin, and slows down how quickly food leaves your stomach. Ozempic mimics that hormone and amplifies its signal. Simple enough, right? But here is where it gets complicated. Your body has an enzyme called DPP-4. The full name is dipeptidyl peptidase 4. This enzyme lives naturally in your gut, and its job is to break down GLP-1. It was designed to do exactly that. But when DPP-4 activity is too high, it does not just break down your natural GLP-1. It starts weakening the GLP-1 drug signal too, weakening it before it can fully do its job. A study published in Diabetes Care found that elevated DPP-4 activity is directly linked to a reduced GLP-1 receptor response. That means the drug gets weakened before it even reaches its target. And what raises DPP-4 activity? Gut inflammation, poor diet, high blood sugar, and certain gut bacteria imbalances. All things that are extremely common in the exact people who are prescribed Ozempic in the first place. So, the very condition the drug is meant to treat can also be the condition that quietly stops it from working properly. That is not a coincidence. That is a gap in the information people are given before they ever start. Now, on top of the DPP-4 problem, there is something even deeper that Stanford researchers uncovered, and this part floored me when I first read it. A study from Stanford University School of Medicine identified that approximately 10% of people carry genetic variants that directly affect how their GLP-1 receptors function. These variants change the shape and sensitivity of the receptor that Ozempic is supposed to activate. In simple terms, the lock that Ozempic is designed to open is shaped differently in these people. The key does not fit as well. Researchers found that people carrying these variants showed significantly lower weight loss response to GLP-1 receptor agonist therapy compared to people without them. That means some people are starting Ozempic already at a biological disadvantage, and nobody warned them. Now, this does not mean the drug is completely useless for these people. For some, it still helps. But it does mean that starting the drug without first understanding your gut environment, your inflammation levels, and your body's baseline is like pressing the gas pedal in a car with the handbrake still on. You're putting in effort. You are burning fuel. But you're not getting anywhere close to where you should be. You're not broken. You were just never given the full picture before you started. So what do you actually need to check before taking Ozempic? I have broken it down into 5 things. I have ranked them from important to absolutely essential. And the one sitting at number 1 is something almost nobody in mainstream health media talks about. It is something simple, something most people already have access to, but completely ignore every single morning. Stay with me because that last one ties every single piece of this together. But before we get into it, I want to ask you something quickly. Where are you watching this from right now? And how long have you been on Ozempic? Or are you thinking about starting it? If this is already making sense of something you've been worried about, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. If this content is helping you, type 1 in the comments or 0 if it is not. Check number 5. Your fasting insulin level. Most doctors check your blood sugar before prescribing Ozempic, but very few check your fasting insulin. And here's the thing, those two measurements are not the same at all. Blood sugar tells you what is happening in your body right now, in this moment. Fasting insulin tells you how hard your pancreas has been working over time to keep that blood sugar looking normal. If your fasting insulin is already very high, it means your cells have been ignoring insulin signals for a long time. This condition is called insulin resistance, and it directly affects how well GLP-1 drugs are able to perform inside your body. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that patients with severe baseline insulin resistance showed a measurably lower initial response to GLP-1 receptor agonist therapy. The researchers specifically noted that improving insulin sensitivity before or alongside GLP-1 therapy significantly improved patient outcomes over time. A healthy fasting insulin level is generally below 10 microunits per milliliter. Ask your doctor to include this in your blood work before you start. It is a simple, inexpensive blood test, and it gives both you and your doctor a much clearer picture of the starting point you are actually working from. And knowing this number also helps your doctor decide whether additional support, like dietary changes or metformin, should be introduced alongside the medication rather than after months of disappointing results. This one test alone could completely change the conversation you have with your doctor before you ever take your first dose. Check number 4. Your gut inflammation markers. Remember the DPP for enzyme we talked about? The one that breaks down the GLP-1 signal? Gut inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of high DPP-4 activity in the body. When your gut lining is inflamed, your body produces more of this enzyme as part of its natural protective response. But that same enzyme is quietly chipping away at your medication every single day. You're paying for a drug, and your own gut is working to cancel out. A study published in Gut, one of the most respected gastroenterology journals in the world, found that elevated intestinal inflammation markers were significantly associated with higher DPP-4 activity and lower GLP-1 bioavailability. Bioavailability simply means how much of the drug actually reaches its target and does what it is supposed to do. You can check your gut inflammation through a simple blood test called high-sensitivity CRP, or HSCRP. Your doctor can order this easily alongside your regular blood work. If your HSCRP comes back elevated, addressing that inflammation first through dietary changes, probiotics, and cutting down on ultra-processed foods can directly improve how well Ozempic works for you from the very first dose. Do not skip this one. Check number 3, your vitamin D level. Now I know what you are probably thinking right now. What does vitamin D have to do with Ozempic? More than almost anyone realizes, and I want to show you exactly why through a real story. Marina is a 47-year-old woman from Ohio who came to me after 4 months on semaglutide with almost no result. She was frustrated. She was consistent with her medication. She was eating carefully. She was completely stuck and started to lose hope. When I ran her full panel blood work, her vitamin D level came back at just 14 nanograms per milliliter. That is severely deficient. I added vitamin D supplementation to her routine. Within 8 weeks, her response to the medication had changed noticeably. Here is exactly why that happened. Vitamin D receptors exist on the very cells that produce and respond to GLP-1 in your gut. A large clinical study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that vitamin D deficiency was associated with significantly impaired GLP-1 secretion after meals. Without enough vitamin D, your gut does not produce enough of its own natural GLP-1, and the internal environment that the drug needs to work inside is already compromised before you take a single dose. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Nutrients reviewed 18 separate studies and confirmed that correcting vitamin D deficiency improved insulin sensitivity and GLP-1-related metabolic markers across multiple different populations and age groups. The optimal range is generally between 40 and 60 nanograms per milliliter. This is one of the cheapest and most overlooked tests in metabolic health. Check it before you start. It could explain everything. Real quick before we get to the top two. If this information is genuinely new to you, please do me a favor and hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it directly helps this video reach other people who are sitting somewhere right now feeling frustrated and wondering why their medication is not giving them the results they expected. You could genuinely help someone today just by pressing that button. Check number 2, your gut microbiome balance. This is where the science becomes truly fascinating, and also where the biggest gap between what doctors tell you and what the research actually says becomes impossible to ignore. Your gut is home to trillions of bacteria, and specific strains of those bacteria are directly responsible for how much natural GLP-1 your body produces after eating. They also control how inflamed your gut is, how active your DPP-4 enzyme is, and how sensitive your GLP-1 receptors are to begin with. Your gut bacteria are essentially the managers of the entire system that Ozempic is trying to influence. A landmark study published in Nature Metabolism found that individuals with lower levels of specific gut bacteria, particularly Akkermansia mucinifila and Lactobacillus reuteri, showed significantly reduced GLP-1 secretion and a measurably weaker response to GLP-1-based therapies overall. Another study from the University of Copenhagen, published in Cell Host and Microbe, found that the composition of a person's gut microbiome before starting GLP-1 therapy was one of the strongest predictors of how successful that therapy would be. People with a more diverse and balanced gut microbiome lost significantly more weight on the exact same Ozempic treatment compared to people with a depleted microbiome. Think about what that actually means. Two people take the same drug, same dose, same schedule. One loses 20 pounds, the other loses 4. Same medication, different gut bacteria. That is not about willpower. That is not about effort. That is pure biology happening below the surface. You can now get a gut microbiome test through several companies without even leaving your home. But even without a formal test, you can start improving your microbiome right now by adding fermented foods like yogurt, kimchi, and kefir, reducing ultra-processed foods, and increasing your fiber intake consistently before you begin medication. That preparation alone can change your starting point more than most people realize. Give your gut at least 2 to 4 weeks of this before day 1 of the medication, and you are walking in with a completely different internal environment. And now we arrive at number 1. The thing I told you about right at the very beginning of this video. The thing most people throw away every single morning without knowing what they are actually discarding. Check number 1. Your morning DPP-4 enzyme activity and the natural compound that resets it. Here is what almost nobody tells you. DPP-4 activity follows a daily rhythm inside your body. It is highest in the morning, especially during the fasting state, which is exactly when most people take their Ozempic. So for a huge number of people, the moment they inject their medication, their DPP-4 levels are sitting at their peak for the entire day. The drug enters a gut environment that is already primed to break it down faster than any other time. A study published in Diabetes and Metabolism Research and Reviews confirmed that DPP-4 activity in humans with metabolic dysfunction follows a clear circadian pattern, with morning fasting levels being consistently and significantly higher than afternoon levels. Timing matters far more than most people realize. Now here is the part most people throw away. Quercetin. It is a natural compound found in the outer skin and peel of apples, in the dark green tops of spring onions, and in very high concentrations in capers. Most people peel their apples before eating them. Most people cut off and discard the green tops of their onions. And most people have never eaten a caper in their entire life. In doing all of that, they're throwing away one of the most well-studied natural DPP-4 inhibitors ever identified in nutrition research. A study published in the Journal of Enzyme Inhibition and Medicinal Chemistry found that quercetin demonstrated significant DPP-4 inhibitory activity. And here's something that really puts it in perspective. The entire pharmaceutical class of drugs called gliptins, which includes widely prescribed medications like sitagliptin, works through this exact same mechanism. They inhibit DPP-4. Quercetin does something biologically similar, naturally, through food you can buy at any grocery store. A clinical study published in Phytomedicine found that quercetin supplementation in adults with metabolic syndrome reduced fasting DPP-4 activity by 17% over 8 weeks and improved post-meal GLP-1 levels by a statistically significant margin. You do not need to buy an expensive supplement for this. Start by eating the whole apple with the skin on. Add capers to your salad a few times a week. Keep the green tops on your spring onions instead of throwing them in the trash. Do this consistently for 2 to 4 weeks before starting Ozempic, and you're actively changing the gut environment that the drug is going to walk into. That preparation is not a small thing. It is potentially the difference between the medication working and the medication disappointing you. So let us bring all 5 checks together before you start Ozempic. First, check your fasting insulin to understand your true baseline resistance level. Second, check your HSCRP to find out if gut inflammation is already quietly working against the medication. Third, check your vitamin D, because without adequate levels, your GLP-1 system is already running below capacity before you take a single dose. Fourth, honestly evaluate your gut microbiome health by looking at your current diet and starting to add fermented foods and fiber before the medication begins. And fifth, start addressing your morning DPP-4 activity with quercetin-rich foods for at least 2 weeks before your first dose. None of these steps require expensive procedures or complicated testing. Most of them require a single blood test or a simple, consistent change in what you put on your plate each morning. But together, these 5 checks can be the difference between Ozempic performing the way it was designed to and Ozempic delivering results so small that you start questioning whether any of this is even worth continuing. The research is clear. Preparation changes outcomes. And now you know exactly what that preparation looks like. Your body is not the problem here. The preparation was always just missing. And now, finally, you have all of it right here. If this video gave you something a doctor never did, please share it right now with someone you know who is on Ozempic or seriously thinking about starting it. Send it to a friend, share it in a group, pass it along to a family member. You might genuinely change what happens next for them in a very real way. Now I want you to think about something. What if your body could actually be encouraged to produce its own GLP-1 naturally without any drug at all, simply by eating specific foods that grow the exact gut bacteria responsible for triggering that production? And I made a full video exactly on that. That video is right there on your screen. Tap on the video on your screen right now because it explains how to naturally increase GLP-1 production before relying only on medication.